In the first scene of the anime, some students are casually chatting, talking about a couple of friends from the school they attend. Suddenly, an important figure from the school passes among these people, and her name is Suzune, the student council president. Behind her, we see Kasuki, the vice president, parading through the corridors as the highest authorities. The two students capture everyone's attention while promising to change the entire school regulation through well-crafted arguments. However, behind these people who seem to have been born to capture the attention of the world are the ordinary students with nothing special to offer the world. One of them is named Usato, an unremarkable and average high school student. Support us with your subscription and help grow our anime community. Each like and share allows us to bring more incredible content to you. Join us on this anime journey. Amidst a monotonous life, perhaps the most exciting thing lately has been watching the growth of a bird's nest under this cold rain. But the truth is that Usato is not happy with this mediocre existence. In fact, he really wanted an extraordinary life, full of achievements and fantastic challenges. But since this is not the reality, Usato settles for going home and watching La Novela from Caldero do Hulk, while leaving a Doritos carcass with mayonnaise. Speaking of which, it's time to leave school, but when the boy goes to fetch his umbrella, it's no longer there. Probably someone took it. Still, there's an extra Danone right there, but Usato is not the kind of guy who would steal one of those to leave the real owner soaked in a storm. At least, not everyone thinks only of harming others. And speaking of such people, there are Suzune and Kasuki who do not want to tarnish the reputation of the student council by letting one of the students go home all wet. Therefore, the vice president lends his spare umbrella to the boy. Upon accepting the help, Usato thinks that maybe this guy is actually nice after all. It's not just because he attracts a lot of attention that he is necessarily arrogant. Moreover, even though the two have never spoken before, he knows Usato's name and even asks if he would like to be called by his first name or family name. Kindly, the protagonist prefers to be called Usato, and the young Suzune approves of the idea, leaving the boy blushing with her charm. And finally, the two most popular students in the school even invited him to walk home together, making the protagonist think that everyone will be envious when they find out about this. Thus, the invitation was accepted, and in the middle of the walk, Usato admits that he thought Kasuki was a bit arrogant because he only talked to the girls in the class, feeling slightly uncomfortable. The vice president responds that he talks more with them because they make an effort to interact to go to the cave. In other words, it seems that no man bothers to talk to him. As for the president, according to Usato, he thought she was even more unapproachable. But the girl doesn't seem to understand why, so Kasuki opens his mouth to extol how brilliant she is in all subjects, as well as being awesome in any sport she plays. As if that weren't enough, she is also beautiful inside and out. In other words, perfection in person. But Suzune doesn't like being treated this way and asks her friend to ease the pressure. And right after that, Usato takes the opportunity to ask if the two lovebirds are together, but they are clear in saying that there is nothing between them and they only walk side by side because they are always dealing with council matters. Usato feels a bit embarrassed for having broached the subject, but Suzune appreciates the colleague's attitude because at least he didn't talk about them behind their backs. At that moment, the girl felt safe enough to return another question and wants to know what Usato intends to do after finishing high school. The boy has no idea, but to his surprise, neither of the two prodigies knew either. And Suzune is capable of achieving any goal she sets for herself. But that doesn't mean she's sure about which path to follow for the rest of her life. But just by getting into this subject, Usato already realizes that this is what competent people worry about, unlike him. At least even though they seem so different, Usato knows well what it means to feel like he doesn't belong in the world. And when the girl reveals this pain, the protagonist discovers that not everything is perfect in the lives of those two. Suddenly, the group hears the sound of a bell ringing louder and louder, leaving everyone confused, except Usato, who couldn't hear any noise at all. Suddenly, in an inexplicable way, a magical circle envelops the three of them, and seems to absorb their bodies towards another dimension. Startled, the two boys look at each other and ask what's happening. But Suzune seems excited about the situation, eager to be taken to a place where magical things happen, unlike the gray and normal world where they have lived every day of their lives. They find themselves observing an unknown kingdom, surrounded by medieval warriors and a king dressed in character. Again, the boys remain perplexed by all of this, but Suzune cannot hide her happiness at being in such an incredible place. Intimidated, Kasuki asks who those people are and what they are doing there, but soon, a guard puts the boy in his place for getting excited in front of His Majesty. The king is Lloyd. However, the sovereign himself does not seem irritated by the young man's audacity, but calmly asks the three students to listen carefully. His name is Lloyd Vagas, Linger Reed de Linger. He summoned those young people to be heroes of these lands because the Demon King might invade this world with his army. Therefore, in the face of absolute chaos, the monarch summoned 3 beings with the potential to become legendary figures capable of even facing the powerful Demon Lord. Lord summoned the Chosen Ones through a forbidden ritual known as the Invocation of the Great Hero, and as the king spoke, Suzune became increasingly excited with words like kingdom, ritual, demon, forbidden. On the other hand, Kasuki is not enchanted by the speech and rages against the big boss of Linger because he thinks it's unfair for them to be taken from their families without consent. However, the king can do nothing, since this ritual only allows the summoning of the Chosen Ones, but it is not meant to return everyone to their place of origin. Still, Kasuki seems about to explode at any moment, but Usato, a calm companion in time, when suddenly the king asks them to kneel in front of the 3 students and promises to one day find a way to take everyone home in the near future. And with everyone present kneeling before the young people, the monarch humbly asks them to become the great heroes they were destined to save this great nation. And after this mercy, Suzune asks how Lloyd knows that they 3 were the great heroes, and in his place, a subordinate named Wells informs that the magical circle of the great hero's invocation is designed to select only extremely talented individuals. The bells they heard moments before the invocation are the sign that they are great heroes. However, Usato did not hear these bells. So it seems that the poor boy accidentally stumbled onto the ship. The king's assistant doesn't seem to care about this, and then shows a crystal ball to measure everyone's magical abilities. While Suzune continues to be amazed by absolutely everything happening in that place, Kasuki asks Usato if he isn't outraged by all this abuse. Despite everything, Usato appears satisfied, happy to be treated as an equal with the other 2, even though he is not actually a great hero. Knowing that he could use magic, he still feels honored to be able to do something important instead of remaining in mediocrity. Surprisingly, the vice president of the student council praises his companion's attitude, but certainly neither of the 2 is as excited as Suzune. After all, the girl is acting as if she had eaten the mushroom from Wonderland. And as she was already facing the crystal ball, adoring the artifact with unparalleled passion, Wells calls the girl to be the first to put her hand on the ball. Soon the magical object reveals that Suzune has an affinity with thunder magic. Moreover, it was identified that she has a lot of mana in her body. Then, the second to take the test is Kasuki, and the boy activates the color of light magic. However, before the person in charge can explain what this means, the council president interrupts the speech and fantasizes that Kasuki will be able to shoot laser beams from his eyes and wield magical swords made of light. Hearing all that nonsense, Usato warns that the vice president didn't understand anything she was talking about, making the girl turn to him with a somewhat bad vibe and comment with a thread in the tongue of this cheeky young man. But at the same time, she changes her posture and admits that she likes this mocking way of the protagonist. Having said that, the perfect image Usato had of his crush completely goes down the drain. Finally, Wells explains that light magic is very rare, and its primary function is to dispel evil and its incomparable power against demons. Lastly, Usato prepares to put his hand on the ball, and before rubbing his fingers on the magical artifact, he wonders if he really possesses any kind of talent like that. And if he does, he commits to helping his newest companions on the mission they were summoned to fulfill. With this courage, he reveals a beautiful green in the crystal ball. And although this color brings feelings of peace, harmony, and tranquility, Welse seems to express the opposite of these emotions, terrified. She grabs the boy by the arm and drags him back to the king. In front of the throne, she quickly explains that the test was successful with the two chosen ones. But as she was about to comment on the third young man, the king interrupts with a joke, guessing that Usato has an affinity with dark magic. At that moment, Welse informs that he activated the green color in the crystal ball, and upon hearing this, the king's face turns grim immediately, and he orders his subordinates to send Usato away from the castle as quickly as possible. The guy is left not understanding anything, while everyone discusses what to do with him, until the boy asks if there is anyone else with the same affinity. Before answering, the king starts to tremble, and nervously reveals that there is another person who awakened the green color. And it is at this instant that an imposing woman invades the throne room, knocking down the gate and asking the king where the chosen ones are. She stops in front of Usato and asks if he is a great hero. The king tries to downplay the situation and says that this kid is just someone common they brought by mistake, but the woman seems to sense the scent of the green from afar. She introduces herself to Usato as Rose, captain of the kingdom's rescue team. And although the boy thinks that this woman looks more like the type who takes lives rather than saves them, he would never say that out loud. Following this, Welse tells that the great heroes are in the crystal ballroom, and when Rose starts walking towards the other two, Lloyd is relieved and promises to take care of Usato's situation later. Meanwhile, he is to be lodged in one of the castle's rooms. However, before the captain of the rescue team leaves the room, Usato remembers that the king has not yet told him what kind of magic he possesses, that green one. Hearing this, Rose stops immediately and decides to borrow the boy. However, the king does not seem willing to allow this to happen and orders Welse to prevent the kidnapping. Then, she covers Usato with a bubble and isolates him at full speed through the window. In an attempt to throw Rose off, however, she is faster and reaches her object of desire, delivering such a heavy punch to the bubble that its remnants are thrown several meters away. With that, Rose finally gets what she wants, and with Usato in her hands, she announces to King Lloyd that she will turn this fool into a responsible user of healing magic. After the departure of the rescue team captain, Welse tells the other two that their colleague has been taken beyond the castle town and is in the hands of the captain of the Linger rescue team. The kidnapper is named Rose, one of the rare users with an affinity for healing magic. This woman's desire is to make Usato a subordinate of her team. But despite this, Welse doesn't think the young man will be skinned alive or anything like that. Hearing the story, Suzune doesn't think it sounds too bad, but Welse adds that Rose's teaching methods are, let's say, exotic. Meanwhile, already in possession of the young man, the captain informs her newest apprentice of his talent, and that this color gift is the reason he is being recruited for the rescue corps. Therefore, this house is now where he will live during the training. Now it's time to meet his newest partners. For this, she calls her subordinates, and all of them seem frighteningly crazy. One by one, they state their names and welcome the newcomer. The first was Tong, the bald giant, and second, a blonde gypsy with a parrot named Mew. Then, Alex introduces himself with the appearance of a crazed pirate, Gomen, a spiky-haired guy with a huge scar on his left eye, and lastly, Gerd D as Faces, a bizarre dwarf who looks more like a species of goblin. All of them approach Usato as if they were offering him for a ritual, but Rose quickly calms the spirits of her commanders and explains to the novice that none of them are magic users, but they are useful in other ways, not always very conventional. Finally, she explains that there are 2 healing users on the planet, but they usually work elsewhere. Therefore, the novice will learn by force to master this art to join the team. Every fiber of Usato's body was warning him that getting involved with this woman is a bad idea, but as soon as he earnestly asks to be trained by someone else, Rose turns her back and announces that the training starts tomorrow. Then, she orders Tong, the bald giant, to share the room with his new team member. And as soon as she leaves, the rescue partners warn in advance that the protagonist's life is going to be hell, and perhaps even hell is too little for what the kid will go through at the hands of that madwoman. Thus, the time for rest arrives, and Usato wonders if he is doing the right thing, but tries to stay positive. On the other hand, Suzune is also lost in her thoughts, wondering what this healer from another world might be capable of doing. The next day, Usato wakes up wishing it had just been a bad dream. But when he looks to the side and sees his new roommate, Tong, with his beetle engine snoring, he is sure that this alternate world is real. And early in the morning, properly uniformed, Suzune and Kasuki visit their future healer friend. Kasuki is relieved that Usato is okay, as everyone was worried about the way he was taken by Rose. Usato seems happy to report that everything went smoothly, but remembering that he will start his training with his crazy teacher today, he regrets to inform that perhaps his friends will never see him again due to the danger. Suzune asks if the buddy really wants to go through this, but he is sure that it is the path to follow, as he had already said that his greatest desire is to be useful in this world. And with this enthusiasm, Suzune boosts the group's morale, clenching her fist and encouraging everyone to give their best in training, as she and Kasuki will also start their learning shortly. Proudly, Usato asks what the two will train with those beautiful uniforms they are wearing. While Suzune is flattered by the compliment, her student council colleague Kasuki pats Usato on the shoulder and confirms that he believes in what he said earlier. Regardless of how they ended up there, the best they can do is give their all, because the responsibility they have is no joke. Thus, the two friends leave, and Usato sees that Kasuki is also having some difficulty adapting to this new world, recounting that they took him away from his family to call him a great hero in a magical medieval kingdom. As for Suzune, who seems to be taking the scene as if she were going to the beach, she already appears much more comfortable in this place. Anyway, Usato's priority is to train hard to become strong enough to be there for them when needed, but for that, he needs to be approved by his new teacher. And speaking of her, Rose appears at the door asking if the chat with his colleagues was fruitful. He is terrified by the intimidating presence of the captain and stands at attention, probably only not saluting because his arms were shaking too much for that. Rose notices this disturbed behavior of the novice and tries to calm him, saying that it is not a prison and he is free to see whoever he wants, but makes it clear that he can do these things only when he is not training. Then, she gives the boy a diary to write down his training routine and how he feels about them. As for the training, the first one starts after breakfast. With that, she leaves, and Usato realizes that the time of hell has finally arrived. After breakfast, Usato is worried about the pile that Tong and the rest of the group put on, saying that the exercises would be crazy, but this first one was quite calm. Standing and meditating with his hands on his chest, Rose taught Usato to feel the mana running through his veins. Seeing that there was a warmth emanating from his chest, Usato could feel for the first time the connection he always had with magic. Moreover, another way to evolve is also to study the history of the world. Lying down, and even though Usato thought he could not read that foreign language, Rose shows that summoned heroes are endowed with a translation magic as soon as they step into this territory. The teacher explains that the kingdom of Ellinger and the demon country are neighbors, meaning they are the main targets of attack due to this proximity. The book he just opened contains information about the different kingdoms of the region, races, and social politics. Up to that point, the boy was sure he would do well if the training was only like that. But the very next day, he already started to work his grasshopper frame, running up hills in a hurry. His muscles beg for mercy, and the kid falls hard on the ground. Rose doesn't ease up and asks who told him to stop, and when Usato pleads for mercy, since his knees are already gone, the master slaps the joints of the Blessed One, making him roll in pain on the ground. However, just like a child who suffers just because they think they are suffering, he stops to feel his muscles and sees that this healing thing is really for real. But in front of the little show that the young man gave, Rose orders the boy to get back to work, and he continues his run, certain that he will die at the hands of that woman. As he distances himself, she encourages him to run until he dies, since she can revive him to keep running. On the fourth day of training, Usato started running with his companions, and everyone left him eating dust, from the shortest leg to the most pot-bellied, and Rose kept making fun, saying that she's keeping an eye on the slug with a lap behind. Usato listens to everything quietly, but always keeps the insults to pour everything into his diary. On the 5th day, he ran until the sun went away, and sparks of his mana began to come out of his body. On the 6th day, he ran under the rain, and Rose warned that his speed was dropping. Distracted by the teacher, he trips and falls face first into the mud, and of course the captain doesn't miss the chance to make fun of the situation.